Nigeria has suspended the planned 5% excise duty on telecommunication services, and meanwhile, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited says that the cost of petrol would also rise to 462 naira per litre once subsidy regime is over. Johnson Chukwu now joins me. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Asset Management Limited. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Johnson Chukwu.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure to speak with you on CNBC.
Now, let's start off the conversation really now with a circumspect perspective to this issue of whether or not we ought to move away from this increase of 5% tax on phone calls and data. Now, we have to face the reality. Nigeria has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratio, but we cannot afford to also pressure the information, telecommunication and communication industry, which has had to deal with 39 taxes and now currently, as we speak, over 41 taxes. How do we find a balance here between the federal government stance and then also the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Issa Pantami, saying there's no going back on this. We cannot afford to have this tax on the telecom sector.
Okay, my take is that one of the things that is lacking in the government policy formulation in the country in recent past is that there's no what you call overall view of or strategic view of what we want to do. The first thing you have to ask yourself is that the telecommunications sector, the ICT sector, what's the impact on that sector on the economy? The Nigerian economy has a lot of leverage that is enjoying from the telecommunications sector. Beyond the fact that the ICT sector accounts for about 18.44% of the GDP in the second quarter of this year, it has a pervasive effect on other sectors, maybe even the agricultural sector. Call it trade, call it the logistics business we're doing today, educational system. So you really can't measure the ICT sector only on how much it's contributing to the GDP. So, and it's one sector the government, if we have a strategic plan, should focus on growing further because of the multiplying effect of the ICT sector on other aspects of the economy, other sectors of the economy. The fact that the economy grew in the second quarter of this year was partly because the ICT sector is acting as an enabler to several other sectors of the economy. So it's not a sector you want to stifle. By imposing additional taxes on that sector, given the kind of burden they are carrying, which is what the Minister of Telecommunication and Digital Economy was able to articulate very well. He said this sector, for instance, has not witnessed any increase in prices in the past three years, despite the current rate of inflation about 19.6%, despite the depreciation of the local currency over the past 3 years. That sector has continued to maintain the same level of service cost, service price, despite the fact it's absorbing additional cost. So it's not a sector you should burden with additional taxes. We're already paying 7.5% of VAT on our consumption of telecommunication services. And you now want to impose 5% excise duty on those same services. So I think I absolutely agree with the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy. The Minister of Finance obviously just looking for a way to get additional income. And the appropriate thing is not to tax to death the sectors that are growing. It's rather to stimulate the growth of other sectors so that the tax burden will be evenly spread. You can't impose all the burden on a single sector because they are growing and then kill them. That's not the appropriate way to go. So I think we should look away from imposing excise duty, which I'm happy that they've suspended it, on telecommunication services and allow that sector to grow further and have the kind of impact it's having on several other sectors of the economy.
Okay, now, Johnson, let's also look at one of the areas that the finance minister is also raising is the fact that if we don't have these taxes coming, where do we find the money? But at the end of the day, now we also, like you've mentioned, we have to look at the pricing of petroleum products affecting the telecom sector, exchange rate volatility and also inflation. If we don't have these taxes come within the telecom sector, where should they go to?
Okay, let's start from the oil and gas sector you just mentioned. Today, the NNPC say that they are paying subsidy of 297 naira per litre. That amounts about 17.8 billion naira per day, and that amounts about 6.5 trillion naira in a year. That's what they call negative tax. So if you eliminate that, in effect, the government would have saved or would have gotten a positive of 6.5 trillion naira. So that's one area to look at. The other areas we need to look at that the government must drive the formalization of the economy. The agriculture sector, which is the largest contributor to the economy, about 23%, is highly not formalized, and therefore we're not able to extract tax revenue from agricultural activities. The manufacturing sector, many of them are small and medium-scale enterprises. The formalization sector level is quite low, and they are not able to extract tax from their operations. Trade sector is highly not formalized. You're not able to extract enough taxes from those sectors. The government should focus on how do we formalize the economy so that we'll be able to easily get taxes or tax compliance, and not to focus on only killing the sector that's formalized and paying you taxes.
Okay.
So for me, the appropriate to grow the economy and then extract more taxes from a bigger economy.
Okay, now, Mr. Chukwu, let's also look at reducing the burden and ease of doing business as well. Government really is having a tough time having to maneuver through some of these challenges we have playing out here. You know, all of the macroeconomic headwinds we have to face now. But let's go on to this report where the NNPC Limited says that if subsidy is removed from petrol, we'll see it placed at about 462 naira per litre. What's your response to this sort of information as well? The pricing of the product, looking at the landing cost versus the pump price.
Well, what I would say is that for me, it's scary, what they call scaremongering, that NNPC, for them to talk about 462 naira to a litre. A lot of inefficiencies that would also be eliminated if it is left in the hands of the private sector. And again, after a short while, we should have local refineries come up with having be regulated. It's something we must, as a people, be ready to accept, because it's inevitable. We really can't afford to spend 6.5 trillion naira on subsidy going forward. So, in as much as it will be burdensome, it will be painful at the onset, but in the long run, the economy will be better off for it, and we as a people will be better off for it. So, presenting the burden of 462 naira based on current flat price, current exchange rate, and current inefficiency we have in the process, in the logistics, is scary. But I think we must accept the fact that if we have an efficient system, market-driven system, we are going to have the product land at cost that not as much as what the NNPC has projected. Okay,
Mr. Chukwu, now wrapping up your thoughts in less than a minute now, I'd also like your perspective to this recent figures we have in terms of value-added tax rising to 1.19 trillion naira. Just within the first half of this year, we are seeing a depreciation when we look at foreign value-added tax collected, dropping 39.6%, and then local VAT payments increased 70.5%. How does this play out, especially with regards to the federal government tax collection strategies?
You know, VAT is one of the easiest tax to collect in the first place. And again, when the price level increases, which is what we have witnessed in the recent past, when price levels increase as a result of depreciation of local currency and as a result of high inflation, because the rate of VAT is a percentage, which is 7.5% on the price of goods and services. So you realize that the volume in terms of nominal value of VAT collected will increase. So part of the increment you're seeing is a lot of depreciation of local currency, higher price levels, and because VAT is charged based on the prices, market prices. So, but if you look at the real value, if you adjust for that for depreciation of local currency and exchange rate devaluation, you may find out that the value in real time may not have so much increase.